Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to another episode of Garage Topics. Today we're getting the Corvette ready for LS Fest East. I'm super happy. Last year the car didn't make it. This year it's making it, and we're adding a couple performance modifications, such as this MSD atomic intake manifold. So I've had this intake for a while now. I actually had it when I was doing this engine rebuild, but I wanted to do some special things to it. One, I wanted to modify it myself, and two, I wanted some other parts to come out. So I'm going to show you what I did to this intake manifold, because this is not how they look stock. I modified this, so take a look at that action. Alright, so I was never a huge fan of the lettering on these, so I decided to shave it off. I used a flap disc at first. My recommendation if you want to do this at home, don't use the flap disc all the way down. Use it to get most of it done, and then use an orbital sander. The orbital sander would have made it a whole lot easier. The flap disc kind of went into it. So after I did that, I sanded it down a decent amount because I went in so much. And then after it was all said and done, it was kind of a white color, so I used trim paint to make it black again, just a light coat of that. So hopefully it holds up, but I think it looks a whole lot better now. So it's looking good now, and I'm really excited that they dropped the price of these intake manifolds, so now they're pretty reasonable, pretty comparable to the other competitors. They make a bunch of horsepower, so I'm excited to get it on, and I want to show you the additional pieces that we've added to get this on, and I'll show you the whole dynamics of this intake manifold itself. So these MSD atomic intake manifolds are meant to run with the stock fuel rails, but I'm a hot boy, and most everyone is. Don't deny it, you're a hot boy too. The fuel rails that come from Holley EFI, you had to modify them to get them to fit, and I wasn't a fan of that. Well, thankfully, MSD created actual focused intake fuel rails for this intake specifically. They've got the MSD atomic logos all over them. They're billet in black, and they're meant to bolt up directly to that intake manifold, so you don't have to modify anything. So all the bracketry's in here, all the fittings. It's a great setup. Carrying on with the hot boy theme, the kit comes with all the hoses and fittings to connect the two fuel rails together. I wanted something a little bit more snazzy, and Earl's hoses and fittings actually sells a pre-made Ultra Pro hose kit. So the lines, the AN, I think they're 8 AN lines that connect the two fuel rails together, they're professionally clamped. You buy this, you don't have to take it to a speed shop or anything, it's just pre-made. So this is a really nice piece, and it'll just be peace of mind knowing that this thing is good to go. When you buy your Atomic Air Force intake manifold, it comes with all the gaskets, all the bolts, etc. Mine's basically, full disclosure, is one that was left over, so it's missing a couple pieces. And this is a good example too. If you buy one used and you're missing a gasket or a bolt, MSD sells absolutely every single gasket and bolt for the intake manifold itself. So you got all the O-rings, all the gaskets, all the hardware. The throttle body on the C5 Corvette is a 3-bolt, where the atomic manifold itself is a 4-bolt, and they got you covered in here. So this is a billet piece. This is connecting the 3-bolt stock to the 4-bolt hole of the intake manifold itself. I talked to my tuner, Matt at MCR. For what I'm doing with the car, he recommended just sticking with a stock throttle body. If you're trying to make ultimate crazy power, you can get a bigger one that's a stock equivalent, but I'm still running the stock ECU and everything, so keeping it simple, this adapter is going to make it a whole lot easier. Alright, I'm pretty confident I have all the parts I need now to install this intake manifold on my car, so I'm going to assemble it on the bench here with all these gaskets and bolts, and after we do that, we'll be ready to slap it on, so let's get it. This is all bolted up now. It's a whole lot heavier now that everything's together. I'm going to put the fuel rails on now, and I'm going to take the throttle body off as well off the car and get this on. But first, let's put the fuel rails on. Alright, so you actually do need to read the instructions, because there are different clips that come in here that mount to the intake itself, the brackets I should say. So for this instance, we're LS1, LS2, LS6 manifold is what we're looking for, so that's the clips we need. There are 2 with a little bit, so we'll find those. Alright, so we're looking for, based on the instructions, we're looking for group A. And so what this means is my injectors are taller, so it gives us more space to mount them properly with the fuel rails, so that's what we're going with. Alright, you got your bolts in here, there should be 12. So there's 4 per rail, so that's 8, and then there's 2 per side, so 6 and 6 makes 12. So I'm gonna mount the brackets to the rail itself, then I'm gonna get the injectors off the car. All right, I'm a dummy. I forgot you gotta put the map sensor on this, which you have to drill a hole for, so I unbolted it. I'm gonna get the intake off the car and make sure the orientation of where it needs to go, then we'll do the modifications. You just need to drill a hole in the back of it. There's 3 different areas you can do it though, so 99% sure mine's in the back, but I wanna take it off before you drill any holes in there, so let's go do that now. All right, we gotta take the intake manifold off. Each car is gonna be different, as mine's modified, so it is different. But what you wanna do is, before I do anything, I spray off all this area. I've got an air compressor. If you don't, use a leaf blower. If you don't have that, have a fan. If not, use your lungs and blow everywhere. So that gets rid of all the dirt underneath here in case anything falls down in the cylinder heads, which you do not want. So I took off the injector harnesses down here, got rid of all those. Taken off some of the vacuum hoses for the throttle body already, moved everything out of the way. I have coolant running through the intake, the throttle body here, so it's gonna spill a little bit. So I'm gonna wait to do that last. And once I've done that, then I'm gonna try and get rid of all the fuel pressure out of here. On my car, it still has the stock rails, so there's a valve in here, kind of like a bike tire. It's basically exactly what it is. It's a little push hole you do in here. I'm gonna put a bunch of paper towels and like a little cup down here so the fuel doesn't go absolutely everywhere, but it probably will. So that's gonna relieve all the fuel pressure so that we can disconnect this here. You need a disconnect tool. You can get those from a hardware store or auto parts store, pretty cheap. But let's get it. It's not too bad. Once we take all those off, then we're gonna take all the bolts out for the intake manifold and it just pops out. It's not too hard on this car, just gotta take your time. All right. Intake manifold's off, and I made my life a whole lot easier, and I kept the throttle body intact because I didn't want coolant going everywhere. So that should make my life a little bit easy. Catch can, it's doing its job kinda. It is letting some oil by, but it's to be expected. Everything looks good though underneath there. As confirmed, map sensors in the back of the intake. So what's gonna happen here is I need to get a spot for where it's gonna mount at, which is gonna bolt right here, but it's solid on the back. They have a couple of these, so depending on what your setup is, you can have it mounting where you need it based on the wiring harness. So this is the map sensor. It's gonna go in here, and this bolt is gonna basically hold it in place, but it needs something to be drilled out so it can actually push in and actually get a reading. So we'll do that right now. All right, so the intake's basically good to go. I've got to add the fuel components now, at least the connections between the 2 rails and the connection to the stock rail. I've never used Earl stuff before, and so I'm really interested in using it. So far, it seems really simple, and it's super like good stuff. So let me show you putting this on. It alters from the kit slightly. I'm going -8 instead of -6 just because this -8 crossover kit existed. So let me show you that. All right, Earl sells this spanner thing here, and it's gonna help not mar this up a whole bunch. So I need to put these lines in the front. These are -8 AN fittings. On the other side, it's I forget the thread size, but it's O-ring. So the O-ring makes the clamping connection in here, and then the hose connects to it. It recommends that you use motor oil or something like that on the O-ring to not damage it. I'm gonna try and use this tool oil. I think it will do the same thing. Just a little bit, just to basically lube it up so you don't damage anything. And then it'll start to get tight once the O-ring starts to clamp, which is what you want. And then to get it fully tightened, you'll get this here, adjust it to the size you need, get to the size you need, and then, man, that's about it. I think it's on. All right. So I'm gonna do the other side, and then I'll show you connecting the 2 together. So this is it here, this is being crimped. You can actually buy these, so you don't have to rely on a speed shop for any of this. And then this is just gonna thread onto here. This one. it's like 97 degrees in here. So here's my issue. Intake's back out, and because this fuel connection here, this intake's so much bigger than the stock one, hit right there. And I was freaking out like, oh no, I probably don't want to mess that cowl up. It's just the fiberglass cowl for where the water drains for stuff. It still goes down the bottom, it's just a side piece, but it's already all smashed in here from me fooling around with the engine, so I'm gonna whack it out right here. This one, it's been cut out already once before, so no worries. I'll just do that real quick and hopefully it'll slide right in. All right, so this actually took a lot of work to get in here, and I'll show you what I had to do. So you saw me cutting the cowl. I ended up having to cut the cowl, this fiberglass piece here that the water traps in from the windshield, here and here for the fuel rail. See there? Just because this engine shakes around, I didn't want it rattling, so I had to cut those two on that side. With the weather stripping, you can't even tell what's going on. And I had to also move the power steering bracket, which I've got to find a solution for still, but I had to move it out just slightly, but I might be able to get it back in. That was to get the throttle body in place. I also had some issues with fuel, had some leaks, so I went with the actual kit that came with the MSD atomic fuel rails, and those worked perfectly. Might need some new valve covers, but other than that, it's oil-free, leak-free, fuel-free. There's no vacuum leaks, there's no fuel leaks, so we're about ready to take this thing and get it dyno tuned tomorrow. The rails look great on here. I really like the intake. It fits underneath the hood barely. The cowl was the tough part because the fuel line just basically, the fuel rail ends here, and then there's a fuel rail that comes whoop back down here. So we had to do a little bit of cutting, but you really can't really notice it at all even when the hood's popped up. I'm gonna trailer this up to get it tuned. That's all I got for today. If you like this video, give me a like. If you like Corvettes and cool, fresh stuff, feel free to subscribe to the channel. If your dog doesn't like intake manifolds, get him checked out by a professional vet, because that's kind of weird. That's all I got. Thanks for watching. Got any questions, ask anytime. Peace out.